I'm Mrs. Crow, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we would like students to revise science, what they should be revising for each of their papers for both the triple and combined course, and what this revision should look like, as well as some of the tools that we would suggest students could use to help them with this revision process. To start with, I'll just summarise how many papers the students will have for either the combined or triple science course, and for both courses there are 6 papers, so there are 2 for each of the sciences. With combined science, as you can see on the bottom of the slide, the papers are 1 hour and 15 minutes each and worth 70 marks, but they still do have 2 in each of the sciences. For triple science, the only difference is that they are 1 hour and 45 minutes and 100 marks to take account for that extra content that's covered in the triple science course. I've also included a picture of a calculator, as it's really important students remember this for all of their science exams. If we start with the biology course content, it's helpful to separate what's covered in each paper, and this is true for both triple and combined. So the paper 1 topics, you can see the 4 topics summarised there, and this aligns with the information in the revision guides that students may have at home, or any resources you might find online on Bitesize and places like that. And the paper 2 topics for biology, there's just 3 topics for paper 2. For chemistry, we can see at the top there the paper 1 topics, and underneath are paper 2 topics for chemistry, an even split of 5 topics per paper for both triple and combined science. And then physics, we've got 4 topics for paper 1, 3 topics in paper 2 for combined science. For triple science, there is the additional space physics topic that the combined scientists don't cover. So for each of their papers, that's a summary of the topics they should be covering. So in terms of how to revise science, there's a number of different ways to go about this, and these are the 3 that I'm going to focus on. So Educake, we'll talk briefly about, that students should already be familiar with, how to go about revising specific topics for each of the sciences, and of course the exam practice, which is particularly important. So students should be familiar with Educate quizzes, and when they log in, they should be familiar with this platform. We've got the orange section here, which shows students their quizzes that have been set by their teacher. So homeworks will be set here for science, and that's where they should access them. But it also has a really handy tool, the Revision Wizard, which is really useful in tailoring questions so that students are asked repeatedly about those areas that they find more challenging. Educake is particularly useful for retrieving the facts that we need to access the content in the exam, and we would love all students to be doing about 10 minutes per day on Science Educake, just to help maintain those facts as we move forward through the exam period. If, however, they want to go a bit more in depth into one particular topic, we've got a few suggestions of how students may go about this. Firstly, Bitesize is really useful in summarising all of the content for the science course. For triple science, students should select these icons once they go into the Key Stage 4 section, so the single science topic pages. For combined science, if they first select science, then once they go through, it will offer the combined science option, and the exam specification we are following is AQA Trilogy. For all of our science courses, we use the AQA exam board, but for combined science it's the trilogy option that we offer. So if they use that, that's going to be the most helpful information. And from this, students can use it to make flashcards, to make revision resources, or use it alongside doing past papers, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. It's also really important that students spend time revising the required practicals. So for all 3 sciences, for both triple and combined, there are a set of required practicals that the exam board expects students to know in depth. They should be aware of the methods, any risks or particular control measures that are put in place for these practicals, and one will definitely come up in each of the exams, if not more, and they tend to have 6 markers attached to them, asking students to deliver methods. So here I've summarised the required practicals for the 2 biology papers. We can see that there's some extra ones there for triple as well. The YouTube link on the side links to a playlist for the biology practicals where some teachers at a school have gone through the method and explained it really clearly, so this can be a really useful revision resource for students to use to support them in answering questions on this and revising those key areas. For chemistry, again, you can see the required practicals for each science, plus the additional triple one, and a new link to the chemistry practicals. And the same again for physics. You've got the paper 1 and the paper 2 practicals, and a new link to those physics practical options. Some other useful resources that I wanted to mention that we can use in slightly different ways. Seneca Learning is very similar to Educake, but students can also access some broader information about some of the topics, and they might find that useful. They should be familiar with logging in using their Office 365 account to access that website. Another website that's worth mentioning is Cognito Learning, which has lots of really good resources for biology, physics and chemistry, and they also have some YouTube videos going over specific topics. So if students in their revision find a topic that they find difficult, that can be a useful place to go to have a quick summary of it before tackling a question. Exam paper practice is a particularly important way of revising, so I want to go over how to do this. I'd argue it's the most valuable way of revising for our students. So I've included a link at the top to the past papers that can be found on the AQA website, and I just want to go over how to access the relevant papers for both the triple and combined science course. For triple science, in the subject section, you need to select either biology, chemistry or physics, depending on which subject you're focusing on. If you're a combined science student, in the subject section you need to select science, and then in the specification box you need to select combined science trilogy. Once you've done that, all of the past papers and mark schemes will appear below for students to then access. At the very bottom of this slide I've just included a few different other links that are particularly useful. So for chemistry, all students will get a periodic table throughout their exam, and I've included a link to one there. And for physics, students will also be given a formula sheet, and I've included the combined and the triple one at the bottom, as they are slightly different for students to use and practice with in their revision. If we focus on how to use past papers, I've kind of categorised it into two ways of using them. The first one is actually as a way of actively revising subject knowledge. So doing past papers with an aim to get the answers correct. So using their sound knowledge that they already have, but when they're getting stuck, getting out a revision guide, using those resources like Educake, Seneca, Cognito Learning, and their exercise books to support them in answering those questions correctly. In this style of using past papers, I would say the timing is less important. Here we're focusing about covering content, and by making it really active and going looking for answers, it will help build those pathways of memory in our brain. The second way of using, and I think this becomes particularly important as students become more confident in their knowledge and as we get closer and closer and closer to those exam dates, is to do those papers under more exam style conditions. So using timed conditions without their notes, to give students a good understanding of where the gaps are in their knowledge, the types of questions that they're finding difficult, and also any students who find timing a little bit stressful, they get that experience at home as well. What's particularly important is the marking at the end, and this is the most valuable part of using past papers for revision. The science mark schemes are strict, and the past papers will require students to apply their knowledge to unfamiliar examples, pulling on the knowledge that they have learned and the concepts they understand. When marking, students need to be really, really strict. If their answer isn't on the mark scheme, they shouldn't be giving themselves those marks. And more importantly is they should be then spending that time understanding why they got it wrong or why the correct answer is the way it is. That is the most valuable learning time in revision. If they cannot understand why the mark scheme is given that answer or how they should have got to that answer, please do encourage students to bring it to their teachers for further explanation, because that can really help close that sort of revision loop and help clear up any misconceptions students might have. This, I think, summarises what I was trying to talk about really clearly. So having that exam paper as a way of practicing, finding those topics that you find challenging, doing some revision on that topic, and then going back to that exam question and trying to understand it and unpick that mark scheme so students feel confident. Hopefully this has been useful in summarising some key strategies for students' revision for the upcoming exams. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact with myself, Mrs. Crowe, or Mr. Easton as well. Thank you.